What is up, basketball fans? Welcome to the NBA Outlet. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron. Kory, how we doing?
Doing good. Nice Sunday fun day. Just got done having a nice family dinner, and I'm stuffed. And I've been enjoying a decent slate of basketball today.
Yeah, a lot of early slates, like we've kind of mentioned on the last couple shows. Now you're getting basketball at the same time as football, essentially, on Sundays. But as always, quick reminder, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, OTG Basketball, and YouTube. And we still got that discount code for you at FOCO USA. OTG NBA 10 will save you 10% off 2 or more FOCO items. But Kory, we're already starting to get some trade rumors, and a big name looks like he's going to be on the market, and that's Kevin Love. Cleveland is willing to listen to offers for Love, and reportedly via Woj, the teams that showed previous interest are Portland, Boston, and Denver. What is your reaction to this news?
We kind of all saw the writing on the wall, right? Yes, he signed the big extension after LeBron left. But that was something that Kevin Love almost not had to do, but it was just a smart business move to get the money now. Obviously struggled with some injuries, and it made sense going into this year, as we mentioned, I believe, on the preview series, that once Kevin Love demonstrated he was healthy, showed what he had, this Cavs team wasn't going to be playing anything. It would make sense to then make Kevin Love available. And, coming up on December 15th, where a lot of teams can finally trade players they signed this past season, we are now moving into trade season, and Kevin Love, not surprisingly to me, is finally on the market.
What did you think about the teams mentioned by Woj? Do you think it was just previous interest, or these teams could still possibly make a move for Love?
I don't see how Portland would do it. I guess you would trade Whiteside for the contract purposes. If they could get Kevin Love, I think it makes sense, but I don't know necessarily if they have the assets that would intrigue the Cavaliers. I think the Celtics make sense. We've kind of mentioned throughout this season how the one thing they're lacking is a presence on the boards, rebounding wise, and trying to figure out that center position. Now, granted, Kevin Love isn't a center and can play some small ball five, but he kind of fits that system that they try and play with. And I think they have some of the younger assets they could use to get Kevin Love. But I think mostly these teams are teams that we're talking about in the past. Like, I don't know if they have. I think the Nuggets probably have the best chance, but I don't think these teams necessarily will be the teams we see talking for Kevin Love now.
Yeah, and you can make an argument, at least in my opinion, I think Denver would be worst off making the move for Love. Like, a Jokic and Love front court is just terrible defensively. Yeah, I watched a lot of Jokic against the Nets today, and he just does not move well. Like, he just does not move out of the paint. Kevin Love obviously has gotten better, but he's still not going to be an elite perimeter defender, especially for a big. And then you look at Boston, I think the fit makes sense, but then contract-wise, how do you make it happen? Kevin Love's making close to $30 million. The really only big contracts they have in Boston are Kemba Walker and Gordon Hayward. They're not really going to try to move any of the big names like Tatum or Smart, and it's still not going to add enough to make a move for Love. And like you said, in Portland's case, like, the move makes sense. They do have the money to make it happen. How many draft picks are they willing to give up? Or does Cleveland just want to get off the contract and open up some cap space? Maybe they get more willing to make the move closer to the deadline.
Exactly. It's all about trying to figure out how to get the contracts to match up. And I agree with you. I don't think it makes sense for Denver, for Boston. I don't really see it happening. But again, Kevin Love will be moved this year.
What's a team that you think it could happen for?
A team that it could happen for. I would give. There's several teams I have down, like the Dallas Mavericks. If there was a way to make the money work, I think Dallas would be an ideal spot, because Porzingis is enough of a rim protecting defender where he can kind of balance out Kevin Love, and I think they are looking for that, quote unquote third star to pair up with Luka Doncic and Porzingis. Granted, they've had some really good bench play as of late. I would also say, depending on which route they want to take, I think San Antonio could possibly make it work. They do have a couple expirings on their books. Then you're looking at rest in the Eastern Conference. I think Miami has the assets to do it. I don't think it makes sense for Miami, and I think Orlando would be like a dark horse team possibly if they really wanted to make a run.
Yeah, no, I really like a lot of those picks. I think it gets interesting. Dallas is someone to keep an eye on. They're kind of, I don't want to say desperate, but maybe willing to kind of push forward their rebuild process. Obviously, they're already making a huge jump being a top four team in the West right now. Getting Love is possible. It's just how many draft picks are they going to give up moving forward? And like I said, what is Cleveland asking for? They just want cap relief. If that's the case, Dallas could be an option here. You mentioned San Antonio. I mean, I think it's possible. We kind of elected last show though that it'd be better off for San Antonio to go that tank route. Miami's been connected to stars like it seems like all season. Another team who's been itching to get a star in town for a long time is the Phoenix Suns. And I feel like Phoenix could be a team that could make a move for Love. I don't necessarily agree would be the best fit, but it's a team who wants to be relevant, and Love would pretty much give them an established playoff spot in the West, most likely.
Yeah, if the Phoenix Suns were able to land Kevin Love, I think it for sure puts them in the playoff picture or keeps them in the playoff picture. Again, you think about the 3-point shooting, the way they kind of get up and down the floor. Offensively, Kevin Love would be great for them, a very good rebounder. Defensively, you're still looking for a little bit, but that Phoenix team in general isn't looking to play a lot of defense. They're just trying to outscore their opponents. Do you know what a deal would look like possibly if it was for the Phoenix Suns? Like who would you get rid of from the Suns to make that work?
I mean, I think it really all depends on what Cleveland is asking for, and I don't think they can value Love like so high. So a lot of it, I think, is just cap relief and one big contract, Tyler Johnson expiring for 19 mil. That's a big part of the deal right
That's
there.
great for them, honestly. The Phoenix Suns is having a guy like Tyler Johnson expiring with a $19 million deal. Like that's so easy to put in a trade.
And then you could probably throw in a Frank Kaminsky, who's the second year of his deal is non-guaranteed, so that's essentially an expiring contract. And then you maybe you put in one of the young guys. I don't know who it's going to be. It's not going to be one of the big names on them. Maybe it's like a Cam Johnson, or maybe it's just a draft pick moving forward. Like I said, I don't think Cleveland can ask for so much. So I think Phoenix could get creative and make a move for Love. And like I mentioned, it seems like for the last 10 years they've been itching to get a star. They've got a couple meetings in free agency, but never landed anybody.
Yeah, I think the player you could possibly see move would be like Dario Saric, a guy who's kind of bounced around and is having a little bit of a better year, but again, still young and has some promise to him.
Yeah, I mean that could be a possibility, or even him going to another team and them getting in more of a young piece that's raw in Cleveland, because I think they need to go just like full on rebuild. But obviously, we'll see what happens with the rest of their moves.
Yeah.
Any other possible suitors you think for Cleveland?
I mean, I guess if like Toronto somehow wanted to get involved, right? They kind of have some contracts they can move some expirings. I don't think it makes sense for them, and also, Love basically plays the same position as Siakam at power forward. But yeah, I don't see too many other teams that at least have the assets. I know there's several teams that could use Kevin Love, but they wouldn't be able to put a deal together.
Yeah, and I think the Raptors are so defensive minded that Love just doesn't really fit in what they do. But it'll be interesting to see what the Cavs actually are able to get for Kevin Love. Like we've mentioned on the show before, contract isn't amazing. It's the next, I think, 3 or 4 years for 30 million essentially. And Kevin Love has dealt with injury. He's probably not the same player he once was, but still, he's probably good enough to be a third option on a championship team. You'd say?
Um, Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, especially with how he's played this year. I mean, this has been a resurgent year for Kevin Love at 31. Kind of almost even showing off more of his playmaking ability this year. So yeah, I think he can still be a third option on a championship team.
Now, talking about third options and big options, we're moving to studs and duds. Kory, who's your stud of the week?
All right, so I have 3 candidates this week.
Okay, I'm making a new rule. So moving forward, you can only have one for the East, and then you can have one for the West.
Okay, I like that. That actually makes my life a lot easier because yeah, okay, that works. All right, so my East stud. This was a toss-up between Antetokounmpo and Jimmy Butler. I'm always going to mention who the guy in the running was, and I'm gonna give it to Jimmy Butler though. Jimmy Butler had a really good week. Yes, they did lose at Boston, but he had 37 points in that game. He had a triple-double in the win over Toronto, a triple-double the other night against Washington. He hit the big three late and said, "I'm a bad motherfucker" when he was walking to the bench. So for me, Jimmy Butler, I mean, we've been saying this all year. He's kind of like just found the perfect locale for him, right? He's able to play more of a point forward role. He's the leader on that defensive unit for Miami. Averaging 2.5 steals per game, getting a couple blocks as well along the way. So for me, he was my stud of the week in the East.
No, Jimmy Butler really balled out, but I think Giannis deserves it just because his stat line for the last week is incredible. 3-0. This is just in 25 minutes a game, 30 points a game, 60% from the field, 50% from three, over 11 rebounds, and like I said, all in 25 minutes. And I feel like Giannis just, this has kind of been brought up. I think Cam mentioned it today on Twitter. He's not essentially getting the love he deserves as being probably the best player in the NBA right now.
Yeah, no, he's definitely not getting the love he deserves. And that's for sure. And the only reason I didn't give him the stud, and this is just like me being me, he had the one game against the Knicks, the one game against Detroit, who aren't very good teams. So not that I held that against him, because still putting up those stat lines, and as you said, in only 25 minutes per game, is insane, ridiculous. The performance he had against the Clippers in general, that was, all the hatred for what happened last year against Kawhi came out in that game. I think easily a stud candidate. And we haven't really been talking about the Bucks in general, right? The Bucks, we have a little bit segment planned later on this show, go figure. But what the Bucks have done this year, it's almost flown under the radar, and they have the same record as the Los Angeles Lakers.
And another thing about Giannis over this last stretch, obviously his jump shot still doesn't look nice, but he shot 50% from three on over 5 attempts a game in 3 games. So we're talking about 15 threes at 50%. Yeah, they're wide open and the attempts are ugly, but just adding that to his game is making the Bucks just that much more difficult to defend. And my honorable mention would be Jaylen Brown, who's been really balling out this year. Super efficient week, 3-0, 26 points a game, 54% from the field, and 46% from three on 8 attempts a game. So he's been balling, but who do you have for the Western Conference?
My stud of the West was LeBron James. First time giving it to him. It could have easily been his partner in crime.
That's who I rolled with.
Anthony Davis. Both those guys had a great week. I went with LeBron. This was a really big road trip for them. After all the naysayers saying their schedule has been very soft, very weak. Going into Denver, going into Utah, going into Portland, not easy games. And LeBron, once again, kind of putting his will, controlling the tempo of the game as this new point guard for the Lakers. So I went with LeBron.
Yeah, and I went with his counterpart, Anthony Davis, who had a monster week as well. 29 points a game, over 56% from the field, over 8 rebounds. But really what stuck out about AD, and this has kind of been more of a full season thing than the last couple games, is his defense. He's had some incredible highlight defensive plays.
That game against Denver, down the stretch, he completely made Jokic his bitch.
Yeah.
A couple of the times, Jokic couldn't even get past Anthony Davis. Davis obviously has great length, great wingspan to be able to contest shots and get blocks. That game against Denver in general, down the stretch, that was a big, big defensive performance by Anthony Davis.
And these two together, you pick LeBron, I picked AD. As a combination, they're just almost unstoppable offensively because they're just such great basketball players. We're talking about 2 top 5 players, and LeBron is probably the best player of the last generation. Then moving forward to the next generation, you could look at Anthony Davis.
Yeah, Anthony Davis too, shooting 34% from three. That's also just like a very good element to have in his game. Obviously, he's shown that shot in his repertoire in the past. But like you said, these two guys are a ridiculous duo. It almost feels like, even though we had them as title favorites and title contenders going into the year, it almost feels like we undersold how good they were going to be together. Because we obviously were concerned about the roster, but these two guys are just absolute animals.
Moving over to duds, Kory, do you want to do East and West for duds as well?
Or
we can just do one dud. We're not that mean of people.
Yeah, we don't have to go both ways for that one. So my dud is Will Barton from the Denver Nuggets. You obviously saw him up close today as the Brooklyn Nets defeated the Denver Nuggets, which I'm sure made you very happy. But Will Barton today against the Nets, the other day against the Boston Celtics, 7 points, 9 points, averaging 14 points on the year. They need him to be an effective scorer for this team to win games. He's a big part of their offense. Him struggling doesn't bode well. And also, Paul Millsap these last 2 games also struggled, which has not helped the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, and Grant actually got a lot more minutes, it seemed like, than Millsap today. He was just outplaying him. But moving on to my dud, I went with Russell Westbrook. And the Rockets were 2-1 this week, but we're looking at Westbrook shooting 32% from the field and 13% from three. This is a former MVP. Yeah, he's putting up some numbers, but that efficiency is terrible. And I know people are going to be like, well, it's more than stats, but yeah, you need to make shots, and that hurts the offense when you don't.
Yeah, that team in general between Westbrook and Harden, they have a ultimate green light, and they're just letting the shots fly. But man, the percentages are getting real ugly for both those guys.
I'm really intrigued. I know you and Jack started working on your top 50 for December entering 2020. The drop that we see in Russell Westbrook in the rankings.
Oof, it's going to be heavy if I had to guess.
Yeah, like it's just one guy who's really struggled, and I think some of it's changing his role, but also I think Westbrook is just kind of getting a little bit worse each season. You've mentioned this in the past. All those knee injuries that he's had, and he's got surgeries on them in the offseason, I think it's starting to catch up to him just a little bit.
6 straight years.
So it's tough to recover. I mean, he plays a really physical game. It's just a lot of wear and tear in your body. But you kind of mentioned this earlier. We're going to talk about the teams that are dominating the NBA right now. And we'll start with the East. We'll start with the Milwaukee Bucks. And you said it. No one's really talking about them. They're 20-3, top of the East, clearly the best team in the Eastern Conference. How has it all happened for Milwaukee?
I mean, it starts with the Greek freak himself, Giannis Antetokounmpo. As we mentioned, as your start of the week, he's been an absolute monster, doing it once again in short minutes, even because the Bucks tend to get into these big leads where he can rest a little bit. Somehow averaging less minutes per game than he did last year, and he wasn't playing a ton last year. It felt like at times. Shooting 56% from the field, as you mentioned, shooting not a career best, but a 31% from three on 5 attempts, which just keeps the defense honest. And the fact of the matter is this team was able to even withstand not having Chris Middleton, who was out with a thigh contusion. Now he's back and seems to be right back into the mix of things. Antetokounmpo has been able to really lead the charge. The Milwaukee Bucks have an identity. They have a solid defense. The role players all contribute on different nights. It just feels like the star is driving this team home, and they don't really have to worry about off nights because generally they have somebody who steps up. And I guess the one thing I'd be concerned about that I will say would be like Antetokounmpo only shoots 59% from the free throw line. Like that's the only thing I can see as a negative to his game so far this year.
Yeah, you'd like to see that get to 70%, especially considering how many shots he takes at the free throw line. But you nailed it. It's been run by Antetokounmpo. He's the reason they've been so successful. He's gotten even better this season. Obviously, they have an array of good players. Chris Middleton's been efficient, but like you mentioned, he missed some time. And a lot of the other guys are playing solid. No one's really stepping up and playing amazing, but the defense has been really good. Number one in defensive rating in the NBA. And when you have arguably the best player in the NBA leading you offensively in a weaker conference, there's a good chance you're going to be a number one seed. And I think things have lined up for the Bucks, and they've kind of benefited from bringing back essentially the same team they had last year minus, Malcolm Brogdon. And that kind of helped the chemistry and get things rolling early because they're already on a big winning streak and the season just started. Yeah, I mean, 14 games to be exact.
Yeah, I mean, that's let's see how long the streak goes. Losing Malcolm Brogdon, as you said, like early on in the season, it was pretty evident that, he might have been underutilized in Milwaukee. But to Milwaukee's credit, they went after and they got guys like Wesley Matthews to try and, and Kyle Korver to try and fill that hole of losing Brogdon. Now, Wesley Matthews, who I saw for a short stint of time with the Pacers last year, is a decent defender, a tenacious defender, so he plays well in that system, and he's shooting 45% from the field and 38% from three. And then having a guy like George Hill who's shooting 53% from the field and 51% from three. Like those two type of role players having such efficiency is what's really benefited to this Milwaukee Bucks team because, it could have been easily a drought losing Malcolm Brogdon because that was a big piece of what they did. But they gave Hill some more minutes. They brought in Wesley Matthews, and they've been able to fill the void that Malcolm Brogdon left.
The George Hill trade they made was essentially supposed to be a salary dump, and he turned into be such an important player for them. And having him this season has been nice luxury. Like you mentioned, shooting over 50% from three. He's one of the leaders in the NBA this season. The Bucks have just been dominant. Do you think this is sustainable for them? Like, are they going to be able to keep this up the entire season, kind of going at this rate? Are they going to cool down? Obviously, they've had one of the weaker schedules in the NBA, but they still do play in the East.
I'm going to say they cooled down a little bit, right? 'Cause I don't know how sustainable the Wesley Matthews, George Hill shooting is, even the Pat Connaughton shooting numbers so far this year. So I won't say it's going to be a season-long thing, but this team is still going to win, 60 plus games, I think. I mean, I had them winning 60, I believe, going into the year. I think 60, if not more, seems right on par once again. And now that Chris Middleton's back, who knows? Now that Antetokounmpo has another second reliable scorer, because again, when Middleton's out, the second offensive scorer for this team, you don't know who it's going to be, right? There's no one you can rely on for 15 plus points per game. I think you hope it's Bledsoe, but he's kind of demonstrated over the years that great defender, offense, don't hope that he can shoot on the jump shot. So, I mean, I think it's going to dip a little bit, but this team is not falling anywhere near the number 2 ranked team in the East.
Yeah, they're going to give themselves a nice cushion. Like you said, they'll be a 60-win team, and they should continue to roll. They're not going to win every single game, but they're going to win a lot of them. Does this kind of help their case in terms of making you think they're a title favorite for the Eastern Conference, what you've seen so far from this season, or you feel the same way going in?
Yeah, I mean, I was really confident on Milwaukee coming into the year, and I'm just as confident. This is going to be a team that we're seeing in the Eastern Conference Finals, and actually, the team that we thought was going to be, neck and neck with them, the Philadelphia 76ers. Yes, they're starting to play a better brand of basketball. They're starting to kind of find their identity. But again, I think the Milwaukee Bucks are for sure the favorite in the East, and almost by a decently long stretch at this point in time.
Yeah, Philly's definitely got to get things figured out offensively, if that's, changing the scheme up or the rotations or making a move. Now, talking about Milwaukee, back to them, do you think Milwaukee should make just that move to put them over the top? Like some type of trade that's out there? It doesn't have to be anything big, but I think just adding maybe just a little bit more to the roster, kind of like we saw last year with Toronto and getting Marc Gasol. Do you think that's something Milwaukee should do this year?
I don't think it would hurt if they could find some sort of point guard, or even a shooting guard who can provide some more shooting. I would do it, because I do think when you get to the playoffs, Eric Bledsoe becomes a slight issue, right? The fact that he can play such great defense but can't necessarily shoot and extend the floor is an issue. Now, I don't know necessarily who that guy is out there on the market, or if that guy's even on the market at this point in time. But yeah, if there was a way to get a point guard in who can maybe still provide some defense with some added shooting, I think that's the move I would make if I'm the Milwaukee Bucks.
I think an interesting name to keep an eye on, that I don't think this would just make them go over the top, but it'd be a nice piece and add some much needed shooting. And this team could be tanking, would be New Orleans, and make a move for JJ Redick.
Yeah. Oh my God. Forget about it. That would be the absolute steal for the Milwaukee Bucks if that was to happen.
If they can, I'm not sure what their assets are like, but something to keep an eye on there. Now, talking about the other team, and we've talked about some of their players in LeBron and Anthony Davis, that's the Lakers, 20-3, top of the Western Conference. And you kind of mentioned before, people were kind of like worried about them because they had this tough road trip. Well, hey, they're still 20-3 and on a 3-game winning streak. Thoughts on the Lakers early on in the season dominating?
We over exaggerated the bench unit possible struggles going into the year. I think as a collective we thought having Rondo on the roster, relying on KCP, relying on some guys who having to rely on a guy like Dwight Howard going today, we were skeptical on could that happen and could that be sustainable and help the Lakers to actually win at a high level. And it just goes to show you, when you have a number one, arguably top player in the league with arguably another top 5 player in the league on the same team, as long as you have a group of guys who look like, I mean, in general, the Lakers look like they like each other, right? Everyone is everyone's having fun, everyone's smiling, they're taking, team photos together on the plane after games. It feels like, at least in my mind, the most collective LeBron team I've seen in a couple of years since that Cavaliers team that won the chip. It feels like this group is very close right now. And that also benefits. You can see that on the court. Guys are rooting for each other. Guys are playing hard for each other. So it all starts with the top. When you have good energy, LeBron, you're winning. Anthony Davis is playing at a high level. It trickles down, and that's when you start to see guys like Alex Caruso gets way too much run time, have a positive impact. Guys like KCP, even though we give him a lot of shit on Twitter, his shooting numbers are very good so far this year. Rondo's came back. And not great defensively, but in the role he's in, coming off the bench, can still provide playmaking. Is shooting very good from 3 himself. So for me, it's just surprising that we've had so many guys we were skeptical of going into the year all pop off.
Yeah, I think that's Spot on, because going to the year, excuse me, you have a guy like Dwight Howard or Rajon Rondo or KCP, and it's kind of like a 50-50 or even maybe lower, like a 30-70 that they're going to have a bad season, and next thing you know, they're playing some really good basketball. And you mentioned we kind of undersold the fact of having LeBron James and Anthony Davis on the same team. Like, how easy does that make it for everybody else? What type of energy that brings? And then you just need to surround them with solid role players, and that's what the Lakers have. Yeah, maybe they lack a little bit of shooting, but some guys are having nice years from the three-point line. And then also, I think Frank Vogel's done a really good job getting this team to play some great defense. We talked Milwaukee #1 defensive rating. Lakers are #3 in that category.
Yep, and fifth in offensive rating. Fifth in offensive rating to me is a little bit surprising because, again, like, it's LeBron, Anthony Davis, but you've surrounded LeBron and Davis with the right type of players, right? Guys who can don't need the ball in their hands to do a lot. And as you mentioned, the defense has been the staple for this Lakers team early. Frank Vogel, love him to death. One of my probably my favorite coach that I've ever had the pleasure of, like, coaching my team to this point in time. Maybe Larry Brown back in early, but I was too young to really care about basketball. So I digress. Frank Vogel's been great. He put his defensive mindset into this Lakers team. It's why, like, he's great at verticality, great at using centers. JaVale McGee, Dwight Howard, Anthony Davis, all three of these guys I think are truly flourishing because of what Frank Vogel was able to do defensively. And again, having all these guys as well who are high basketball IQ guys defensively all just fit Frank Vogel perfectly.
And you mentioned it, that's been talked about a decent amount. Having Dwight, AD, and JaVale McGee on the same team, the rim is always protected, and sometimes it's double protected. And then even a guy like LeBron James decides he's going to play good defense this season, it's going to make a huge impact. So the defense from the Lakers, the offense from the Lakers, everything has just been really impressive. Do you think this is going to be sustainable for them, or now as the tougher stretch in the Western Conference approaches, it's going to get a little bit harder? Because unlike the Bucks, the West is filled with a lot of great teams on a regular night-to-night basis.
I think it's going to maintain pretty. I mean, they're going to dip a little bit now. I mean, we're going to see eventually some back-to-back losses. I think eventually that's going to happen. I think that happens to almost any team. So I don't think it's fully sustainable, because I do think at some point in time there's going to be some shooting doubts, some droughts throughout this team. We kind of saw Danny Green, at least this past couple weeks, he's been a little bit in a slump shooting wise. I don't think it's anything that this Lakers team led by LeBron James and Anthony Davis can't overcome. But again, the Western Conference is a tough, deep conference. And they could have easily had a couple more losses on the schedule. They've had some close games. The game against the Mavericks, they won in overtime, sticks out. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if they had some struggles. But again, this team, as long as LeBron James is healthy and on this washed king tour, with Davis playing at, arguably MVP level, Defensive Player of the Year level, they're going to be okay. Because I don't see any of the role players dropping off significantly. And who knows? Maybe Kyle Kuzma, even though I've kind of dragged him recently because I don't know necessarily why they were so high on him, because he just feels like a glorified role player. But if he gets going, he starts to find his offense, and maybe he does become the third scoring option for this team, this team could even be a little bit better.
Yeah, Kuzma hasn't been great, but I think some of the other guys will kind of regress, and then maybe he'll step up into more similar numbers we've seen in the past. But also, I think we mentioned with the Bucks, I think the Lakers could make a move, more of a role player type move, because they don't necessarily have the assets to do that. But how do you feel in terms of them being the title favorite in the West? Are they clearly the team that's going to come out of the Western Conference in your eyes, or nothing has really changed going to the season?
No, they're the team right now coming out of the West. Since at this point in the season, we're right. We're the fifth of the way in.
A quarter
of the way in. Excuse me. I don't see Houston, Denver, or Utah really being in that title conversation. I think they're all good teams, but they've kind of shown me who they are so far this year. I think the Clippers are the one team we'd probably put in the same conversation as the Lakers. But even still, as of late, I know they won tonight in very big fashion over the Washington Wizards. Kawhi Leonard hasn't had the greatest shooting year to start. That knee could be a slight concern. Paul George obviously has been fine. I think I'm more confident right now with the Los Angeles Lakers than I am with the Clippers, and I don't think I felt that way going into the year. I think I was way more confident in the pairing of Kawhi and Paul George. Granted, just a regular season. Things are still working out. I know that it came out last week that Paul George and Kawhi hadn't even practiced together yet. Now, granted, just practice. As Iron Iverson would say, we're talking about practice, not the game, practice. But yeah, I think I'm more confident in the Lakers for sure.
Yeah, I think they definitely help your confidence because they're not going to get worse. They're going to probably improve as the season progresses in terms of chemistry and getting a feel for each other. And like I mentioned, I think they'll make a smaller move. But you still feel like the Clippers team maybe is designed a little bit more for playoff basketball. It's tough to say, but the Lakers and Bucks are my picks going to the season. I feel maybe a little bit better about them, but still a lot of year left.
Yeah, still a lot of year left, as you mentioned, and I agree with you too. I don't think I've said this. I agree with you that I think the Lakers do add some sort of player at some point this year. I would have to believe it's some sort of 3-point shooter, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking at the New York Knicks and they're pinpointing a guy like Wayne Ellington or maybe even Reggie Bullock again when he's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, Bullock was on the Lakers, I think, last season, didn't do too well, but you never know. Ellington, that'd be a nice add, or even maybe somebody like Marcus Morris, just giving them some 3-point shooting. But talking playoffs, we're going to play a little bit game, and we're going to act like the playoffs are starting tomorrow, and I'm going to give you a matchup, and you're going to tell me who's going to win in the 7-game series.
Okay.
So first up, Miami Heat and Toronto Raptors. The Raptors are the home team because they were champs last year.
Miami in 6.
Ooh, this is a really good one. I think this series definitely goes 7 because I think these teams are really evenly matched. I'm going to go with the Raptors here because I feel more confident in what I know about them. Where I think Miami going to a playoff series, it's going to be a lot of first-time stuff for like first time in a big role, other than Jimmy Butler. Like
the experience is surely in the Toronto Raptors' favor. I agree with you. I don't know. I'm just
especially because Miami has to depend on a lot of young players. It's not like it's a super veteran team. Like Bam's still a young guy, Winslow's still young. If they're playing Tyler Hero and not a good amount of minutes, it's like, do you feel confident them compared to Lowry, Siakam, Gasol, these guys who did it last year?
Yeah, it's a fair argument. I mean, obviously, we've kind of mentioned it. Marc Gasol is a guy who just looks clearly older this year. Siakam has been great, without a doubt, but there's still some inconsistencies to his game. And I think because of the offensive weapons on the Toronto Raptors, against a good defensive team, you can just pretty much single out Siakam. Now, granted, they still have a great offensive system. A lot of ball movement goes on. I just think I'm more confident in the defense and their ability to kind of limit the Raptors by the Miami Heat.
I think the argument would be the same thing for Toronto, though.
Right.
Like they're arguably maybe not statistically the best defensive team, but when it comes to playoff time, they have a lot of really good defenders. I'd probably just give the nod to the home team in this situation. If the Heat were home, I might lean with them, but since it's home in Toronto, I'd go with the Raptors. Obviously, it's a hypothetical situation. But next up, Celtics, Sixers. Sixers are the home team.
It's Sixers in probably 6. I think it's too much defense, and I mean Enes Kanter getting eaten up. Daniel Tice, can he really limit Embiid in a 7-game series? Time Lord Robert Williams, how does he match up? I think the size for Boston, or not, the lack of size for Boston would be their biggest issue.
I agree. I think in this situation, you'd go with Philadelphia, probably in 6 or 7, because Embiid would just be too monstrous. And then even, Embiid gets in foul trouble or something, you still have Al Horford and Tobias Harris, and Ben Simmons has been on a tear lately. So I'd lean with the Sixers, but Boston would make it an interesting series. Next up, though, Dallas and Portland. Portland is the home team. This is a tough one, right?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I mean, I'm going with Dallas easily. I just don't know how many games I want to go. I'm more stuck up on, do I think they do it in 5 or 6? Because I think Dallas in 6. As of right now, I can't go against Luka Doncic. He's been a stud. I know Lillard's extremely talented, of course. McCollum, Melo's played some good stretch. Losing Rodney Hood just really sucks. That's a big loss for them. And then we've seen Whiteside. I mean, that guy's just, I don't like it. Maybe if Nurkic is back, that's different, but I think I'd go with Dallas in 6.
Yeah, I'd go with Dallas in 6, and I think you push it to 6 because of what Portland's shown in the past, and just having Dame and CJ, even Melo to an extent, would probably do at least a little something in the playoffs. But Dallas, having Luka, who's playing like an MVP candidate, we didn't talk about him much this show, but we have like the last 2 months, and then KP, you think would be in better shape by then, and then even the rest of the supporting cast in Dallas is not great, but they're solid. They're one of the best bench units in terms of scoring this season, so I think they'd be able to beat Portland. But next up, Denver Nuggets, Houston Rockets. Rockets are the home team.
Oh man, now this is a tough one. I feel like I'm just like a Rockets hater at times. I think I would go with Denver. I think I would go with Denver in 7. But again,
I don't know how Denver would deal with Jokic like in this series because they're just going to force a switch every single time he's on the floor.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I watched Jokic today, and like I came away, I haven't watched a ton of Denver this year, but I was not impressed. Like his defense looks worse than last season. It's just almost like he's lazy. I know people have mentioned he's tired, but like defensively, he needs to do something because at the level he's playing at right now, they can't probably win at a second round playoff series.
I watched I haven't watched a ton of Denver myself this year. I've probably watched a handful of games. I watched the other night against Boston though, and it's the same thing. Boston would put him into switches and get him switch onto a smaller guard or onto one of the wings, and they would just go to town on him. Again, I think I put the stat up on one of our Believe It or Nots. They were shooting. A number came out. He was giving up 85%. People defended by Jokic were shooting 85%. Like that's really bad. Like that's not good. And that's definitely an issue for them. So you're right. But like, does Houston have enough outside?
I don't know. Like I almost feel like Denver could win the series because they had to play Mason Plumlee bigger minutes. Like when I watch,
you're right. I mean,
it's tough to say because Denver has so many like solid to good players on the team. It's just like they don't necessarily have like the superstar, the all stars. Jokic is a superstar when he's locked and engaged. Last year in the postseason, he was really good, but like, is he going to play at that level this year? Is Jamal Murray going to take that step? It's like I don't know. We've talked about this before. Jamal Murray, just like something about him doesn't scream all star. Yeah,
it's a I mean, actually, if you want to think about it. Especially like so far this year, the Nuggets are kind of frustrating, right? Because it feels like this team should have taken a jump, and it almost feels like if they're not at the same level they were last year, they might have even taken a slight step back.
Especially because the rest of the West probably got better this year, and they really only added Grant.
Right, exactly. Because I think, like many of us, they were banking on Jokic, Murray, maybe even Gary Harris to a degree, taking that step forward. And Gary Harris, a couple of years ago, we were really high on him. Collectively, like NBA Twitter, thinking he was going to be the next big 3-and-D guy, and he's kind of plateaued as mainly a D guy with some shooting. But this is a tough. Who would you?
I think I'd probably go with Houston in this series. I think Denver's like they're just like sporadic so much that it would just make me want to lean that way. I think Harden can get his against Jokic if they're forced to play him because it'd become like a really big decision for Mike Malone. Am I going to run with Plumlee and have the defense, or am I going to run with Jokic and have the offense? Can other guys make up for it? But Houston does such a great job of kind of spreading you out too. So it's like they would be able to just consistently expose Jokic. Obviously, Houston's going to have to hit their shots. Westbrook's going to have to do something, but I think Houston would take it in 7.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I don't know. For some reason, I just have a concern on Houston in the fact that I just don't trust the supporting cast outside of James Harden. I mean, Ben McLemore is heavily relied upon.
He scored 27 last night, I think.
He had the team high in points. Surprisingly, again, they have the green light for 3-point shooting. Like he had 17 the one night. Harden, again had 17, I believe, last night as well, 3 for 17, which isn't great. I think my one concern would be the depth of Houston compared to the Nuggets. And again, we've kind of seen this in the past, several years in the playoffs. It does feel like James Harden gets kind of worn out, in the later part of series, in the later part of the season. So I don't know if maybe, especially like, again, he's having to do even more possibly than he did last year. I don't know if that plays a huge part when it comes playoff time, but I know that you can't rely on Russell Westbrook and you can't necessarily rely on anyone else besides James Harden for this Houston Rockets team in a 7-game series. So I think that's why I always have them underneath, certain top teams in the West.
Yeah, I think it could also matter if you were playing the Rockets in the first round or the second round because you mentioned fatigue. They're not going to play a deep rotation. Harden's going to be asked to do a lot. First round, he's going to be a little bit fresher. Second round, he might be a little bit more tired. You can take advantage. But I think that'd be a really fun series.
Oh, definitely. A lot of offense for sure.
Now, this has been talked about pretty much all offseason already, and this is the expected Western Conference final. Lakers and Clippers. Let's go with the Lakers being the home team because they do have the better record right now.
I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter who the home team is.
Yeah, true.
Whoever is home, I mean, whatever.
Well, honestly, it sucks more for the Clippers because if they're home, it's still going to be a Laker home.
That's what I'm trying to get to. It doesn't matter. That's going to be a Lakers sold out crowd mainly, unless you're a season ticket holder for the Clippers. Yeah. Oh God, this is just like, how the hell do you say an answer and completely like trust it in this kind of situation?
I think we can go as of right now of what we've seen so far.
I think it's 7 games, no matter what. And I think I'd probably go Lakers in 7 right now because I think LeBron and AD I'm just more confident in. Whereas Paul George I think has looked really good. But I'm a little bit lower on Kawhi Leonard at this point in time than I was going into the year because I don't think he's been bad. I don't think he's really been like top 5, a top 5 player in the league currently this season. I think he's struggled, whether that's because of the knee or just trying to get acquainted with everything else. I just haven't been overly blown away by Kawhi Leonard to this point.
Yeah, and I think for Kawhi, it's also like, he's going to play his best basketball in the postseason anyways, where he's kind of like similar to LeBron's been the previous years, where LeBron's playing really good right now, but usually he kind of, I don't want to say coast, but, you're only getting 80% or 85%, and then during the postseason, you see 95 to 100. I think I'd lean with the Lakers right now. That's also because I picked them going to the season, but I also think this is probably like, you've mentioned this a lot. LeBron's like last big year of being like an MVP level player. Next year I think it'll even be more of a focus on AD, where this year is still like, hey, this is LeBron's team. He's still going to dominate on a night-to-night basis. So I feel confident about him in a playoff series this year.
Yeah, I mean, and also just like I think that match. I didn't think like even though LeBron would never admit it, and he probably doesn't think he's ever gonna take a step back. LeBron understands the sense of urgency.
Yes.
Especially after not making the playoffs last year. And I think the Lakers in general as a team almost feel that, where they're like, maybe, not like, again, like you're not thinking this actively, but they all know deep down that like there's only so many years of great LeBron James left. Let's get it while it's still hot.
And even just the team in general, there's a lot of vets in this team. They're not signed on long-term deals. This is an opportunity for them to win a championship. I think they'll capitalize this year, where for the Clippers, I think you're looking at more of a long-term thing where you have multiple years. Obviously, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard aren't signed for like 4 or 5 years, but you still feel pretty confident in keeping those guys. But Kory, any playoff series you want to throw at me that you could come up with randomly right now?
For shits and giggles, right? Pacers, Nets.
I knew you were going to ask this. I should have just asked it myself. I mean, I'm just going to pick the Nets here because I'm not going to not do that. And I guess probability is on my side, but I think there is a matchup problem for the Nets with the Pacers because they don't really have anybody for Sabonis. But if the Nets were able to get healthy, I don't really know what their team looks like yet anyway.
I'm going to go with the Nets. Just kidding. I'm going with the Pacers, especially if they're healthy. But I will say, I think this would be like a 6 or 7 game series. This would be a deep series, I think. So I don't think neither team overly excels in one category over the other. So I think the defense probably leans for the Pacers, but I would say the offense leans towards the Nets. But yeah, I think this would be a fun series. I mean, if Kevin Durant's healthy and Kyrie's healthy, I think it's the Net. I would probably pick the Nets, if I'm being honest, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, we don't know about KD. Obviously, we don't know about Oladipo either. We had like that maybe we're going to find information, but it really turned out to be nothing type of thing.
Oh, my God, dude. I waited an hour to get a report of no timetable. Like, come on.
That sounds like the Brooklyn Nets every week. I mean, like you would think when the Kyrie news came out, he's going to miss, 5 games. He hasn't played in, I think, 12 or 13 straight games. So I'm not even sure.
He was only trying to dodge the Celtics, remember? Like,
yeah.
He's only not playing because he didn't want to play the Celtics. That's all. And now he's just making it. Now he's just making sure people don't, catch on to what he was doing. That's all.
Yeah, he might not play until after March. That's when they match up with Boston again. Who knows?
Next to the playoffs, you got to just wait out the whole year now.
Yeah, honestly, that's a playoff series I would love to see would be Boston versus Brooklyn. I think that'd be a really good series, especially because of the tension between those teams. But I think the East is actually going to have a ton of great first round playoff series. Essentially, everyone who doesn't get matched up with the Milwaukee Bucks, like that 1-8 matchup is going to be bad, but I think the rest of the East from like 2-7 is going to be fun.
I mean, I honestly, just obviously the East in particular, but I think across the league, we're going to see a bunch of very fun
First
first
rounds,
round
yeah.
matchups. Yeah, 'cause I think even in the West, any 8 seed, I think, yeah, like they're not going to win against the Lakers, but there isn't necessarily any team I think doesn't put up like a somewhat of a good showing against the Lakers in a first round series.
Yeah, it depends. I think it also depends on like do other teams essentially get their shit together. Is Portland getting back in the playoffs? Is San Antonio getting back in the playoffs? Are like good teams? Or are we going to see like Minnesota and Phoenix get that 7 and 8 spot? And I think if they got matched up against like either LA team, they probably get crushed.
Ooh, a little news if you want to drop right now.
Drop
Gordon
it in.
Hayward could return as soon as Monday to the Boston Celtics lineup.
And I thought you were going to tell me something juicy. No, just kidding. I mean, yeah, I saw the news about Hayward this week possibly coming back. I think Boston's in great shape with or without him because Jaylen Brown's been so good. But they're going to start to kind of figure things out and even get to a higher level. So good for Boston.
Yeah, for sure.
But out of the playoff series, finishing up, we got games of the week. So starting off with Monday, Kory, what should we be watching?
Monday, fresh Monday to start the week. So obviously for me, I think my game of the week will be Clippers Pacers for Monday. I think this is a game that. All right, so this is my reasoning.
It's the best game. You don't even have to give a long list of reasoning because Monday is just not a good slate.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I mean it is the best game. I also think it's just like the Pacers in general, for being 15-8 without their best player, don't catch much media attention. Now, granted, that's just kind of how it goes with being a Indiana Pacers team. Like they just kind of fly underneath the radar. But I think this is a good opportunity for them to kind of catch some teams or catch some attention if they were to put in a good effort and play well against the Clippers. Granted, easier said than done.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is also it's Paul George returning to Indiana. Pacers are at home. Clippers haven't been amazing. I think it should be a fun game, and the rest of the matchups on Monday night just really aren't that good.
Yeah, no, it's a weak slate.
I mean, actually, Minnesota and Phoenix, 7th and 8th seed respectively in the Western Conference. I think that's actually a kind of fun matchup, but I'd still lean towards Clippers and Pacers.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I'm glad.
Heading to Tuesday.
Yeah, so I'll be on OTG Basketball Twitter on Tuesday night for this 4 slate game of action. And there's 2 games in particular that are entertaining. I think Hawks Heat will be fun, offense versus defense. I think Nuggets 76ers, though, would be my game of the night.
Yeah, I'm going with Nuggets 76ers. I think that's going to be a good game. Obviously, Jokic and Embiid. We mentioned Jokic kind of struggling. How's he match up against a team like this? It's going to be on TNT. I'm not really as high on Atlanta, Miami. I think I've watched Atlanta enough to know that it's just going to be Trae Young and everyone else is going to be pretty bad on that team until John Collins is back.
Yeah.
Cam Reddish is starting to heat up, though. At least like he's starting to show some things, so it's not all wasted.
And low key, Wizards Hornets could be fun. Like as an appetizer before Nuggets Sixers, that game starts at 7. Nuggets Sixers starts at 8. Wizards or Hornets both seem to score a lot of points, so
that could be
fun. Yeah, it could be a fun appetizer for the night.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I think like there's a lot of young guys that are just going to let it go in that game, and before you even turn on Denver, Philadelphia, you might see 33 pointers attempted.
Yeah.
Now on to Wednesday, we got a big slate.
Big slate. I think we're both leaning to the same game. I will say Celtics Pacers rematch of last year's playoff series will be interesting. Both teams also right there in the top of the Eastern Conference. But I would think Clippers Raptors would be the game of the night. Kawhi Leonard returning to Toronto.
Yep, that's the game of the night right there. Like you mentioned, though, Celtics Pacers, I think it's another good one. Both on at 7. Other than that, for a big slate, there's not a ton of great games.
No, there isn't. I mean, your Nets play the Hornets. They had a
3rd time this year already, which is just weird. Like I've seen enough of Charlotte.
Yeah, that's how I felt. The Pacers have already finished their season series with the Detroit Pistons, which seems weird to say as at December 9th or 8th, whatever today is.
Yeah, they're not even going to play a game in 2020.
Yeah, against a division foe.
But on to Thursday, another small slate. What are we looking for?
Another small slate. And again, I will be on otgbasketball.com tweeting. or OTG Basketball on Twitter tweeting, not .com. There's not no way to tweet from .com.
We can add a feature.
Yeah, we can add a feature. So I think easily I would say Sixers Celtics. There's a little bit of a rivalry there. I think that's probably the biggest star matchup going on. I think Blazers Nuggets should be fun to finish out the night, but I still think the best game is Sixers Celtics.
Yeah, I'd lock into Sixers Celtics, and then I'd probably watch at least the first half of Portland Denver. If Denver and Portland are having a close game, I think that'll be a fun one. But there's a possibility at home Denver could really crush Portland, who's been inconsistent this year. But like I said, they're starting to pick things up. But like you mentioned, Rodney Hood being out, it's going to be a major blow to that team.
Definitely.
Friday night.
Friday, again, not a overly exciting slate of games, but I think the best game is easily the best game, and that's Lakers Heat. The Lakers still on this road trip, still trying to prove all those schedule weak haters wrong. This is a tough game. Miami has shown to be a very tough defensive team, so I would say the Lakers Heat would be my go-to.
LeBron returning to Miami again. I think that's always a little bit of fun, and obviously Jimmy Butler's going to get the guys going. I think it'll be a good matchup on Friday night. I think there's some other okay games, but nothing that just really sticks out. For some reason, I think Houston or Orlando will be a kind of decent matchup, and I could see Clippers and Minnesota being okay.
Yeah, Clippers Minnesota I have circled as my second, and I also, for those who care, Pacers Hawks last time they played came down to the wire. With the overtime Pacers win, in which Trae Young I think had 39 in that game or 45, so that could be fun too.
He had some crazy shots in that game.
Yeah, he did.
On to Saturday night.
Saturday is definitely a weaker slate of basketball games. I think the two games I'm looking at in particular would be Nets Raptors, as well as Miami Heat Dallas Mavericks. Heat coming off a back-to-back though. But Dallas Mavericks, Luka Doncic has become must-watch. I think I would say Heat Mavericks are my game of the night, but I would say Nets Raptors would be my runner-up.
Yeah, first division matchup of the year for Nets Raptors. Still kind of unknown if Kyrie will be playing in that game. I would assume not. I think it'll still be a good game because they've been winning games without him. But Miami and Dallas, you got some star pop. But like you mentioned, back-to-back for Miami, and they just matched up with LA the night before. Not very nice by the schedule people.
No, not at all.
And I guess, I maybe want to say OKC Denver is just giving me a weird feel that it could be an okay game. OKC has played some really fun games, including that wild finish with Steven Adams and Dennis Schroeder forcing OT.
Well, we got to acknowledge what made that possible. His jersey's untucked.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Delay of game by Chris Paul. Knowing that they already had one delay of game call against them and 2 equals a technical free throw. Chris Paul, we know how smart he is. We know his basketball IQ is off the charts. Having that kind of situational awareness to understand that delay of game will give your team an even better chance to possibly tie it up and go into overtime. Salute, because that was one of the crazier finishes I've ever seen in an NBA game.
All-time petty Chris Paul, capitalizing for the W.
Wow. And
just don't do it to Kyrie, CP3.
Yeah. Yeah, let untucked God do his thing. And also, shout out to Steven Adams. I need a quarterback this week in fantasy, and I wish he was available because that man threw a dime to Dennis Schroeder.
I love the I don't know if you saw the photo beforehand. You saw the two communicating.
Yeah.
It was just beautiful from both ends.
Yeah.
And they won the game in overtime. I think anytime you land to play with that, it gives you so much energy to win the game. But on to Sunday night, final matchup of the week. What are we rolling with?
Sunday sucks, first off. I want to say this is not a great slate of basketball. I think I would probably go with Sixers Nets as the game of the night, with maybe Lakers Hawks as runner-up. But that feels like an easily big Lakers blowout with Trae Young probably scoring 40.
Yeah, I don't think you feel great about any of these games. Nets on a back-to-back. They have to face Philly the next night. Obviously, Joel Embiid's going to be a monster going up against Jared Allen. I'm not really sure if I'm looking forward to any of these games. Obviously, I'm going to watch Nets Sixers, but not ultimately a great week of games.
No, actually, it feels like there's a lot of weak matchups.
It was an easy week for game of the weeks because there's just so many bad matchups.
Yeah. I felt like last week we had, a couple of nights each night where we had 2 or 3 games that we could easily have circled as the game of the night. Maybe next week.
And you're not even asking for a lot. I'd be happy with just like one good early game, one good late game. That's all we want. We don't need a crazy slate, but just hit us with 2 this week. Not a ton of that. But Kory, that wraps it up. As always, a pleasure. Thank you everybody for listening. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, OTGBasketball.com, and YouTube.
Peace out, Knuckleheads.